actually go ahead and start. All right, so thank you for returning for session 2. I hope you had a good break to get refreshed. So session 1 was about looking into care issues from various lenses through the perspectives of gender, transnational migration, development, the young generation. Now we're going to dive deeper into the care crisis in Korea and how it intersects with the migrant care work issues. We have here with us today Professor Kyung-min Kim, Professor of Child Development and Family Studies at the Seoul National University, to moderate the session. So without further ado, thank you.
All enjoyed the prior session on gender and care economies. I'm also very excited to have another wonderful session on migrant care workers. This is a critical global issue as well as our local issue, given our rapidly changing care context in Korea. In this session, we will have 3 presentations and a full discussant. Before we get started, first let me introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Int'l Peng. She is a Canada Research Chair in Global Social Policy and the Director of the Center for Global Social Policy at the Department of Sociology and the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. She's an internationally well-known expert in global social policy, focusing on gender, migration, and care policies and the care economy, especially in East Asia. Today, she will give a keynote presentation on transnational and global migration of care workers. Please join me welcoming Dr. Peng.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. If I may, just so that I could read with my glasses, and I'll just remove it for now. So thank you very much. So in my talk on the transnational and global migration of care workers, social and economic perspective, I would like to do 4 things. First, I would like to talk very quickly, give an overview of the current care situation. Then I would like to talk a little bit about the impact of the COVID-19 on the care work and the care migration. And then third, in this third section of my talk, I would like to talk about the social and economic perspectives on the transnational and global migration of care workers. And then finally, sort of as a way to think about moving forward toward more fairer and more sustainable global care migration, I would like us to just think about some of the sort of 5 R's of the care economy and using Canada as an example, which we might or might not want to follow, but as an example of a country that's trying to deal with the issue of care work. So let me start. So I think of the current situation with respect to care and care work can be summarized by 2 key features. The first is that there has been a huge demand for care globally, and that it will continue to grow in future. The reasons for this are, first, aging population, resulting from the combination of rising longevity on the one hand and declining fertility on the other. And this has been happening not just in the global north or the high-income countries, but also in the global south or low and middle-income countries. So for example, the UN demographic projections shows that the number of people over the age of 60 will more than double between 2017 and 2050 from 962 million to 2.1 billion. And most of that will happen in Asia and other areas like Africa and Latin America and Caribbeans. More critical is that people over the age of 80, so those are the people who really begin to need care and long-term care, will more than triple from 137 million to 425 million during this period. So that's a huge increase. The second reason, as Mr. Chang from POSCO mentioned in his congratulatory remark earlier, the increase is the increased women's labor force participation, and this is happening in many places. In Korea, for example, women's labor force participation rate has risen from 47% in 1990 to 54% in 2019. So it's within one generation. Finally, the third reason why there's a growing demand and continuously growing demand for care is that in addition to the demographic and labor market changes, we have also seen changes in social norms and attitudes, for example, about investing in childcare. Of course, Korea is an exemplary case of social and cultural investment in childcare and children's human capitals. This has been, in fact, this investment has led many sociologists to refer to terms as intensive mothering. But this is not just Korea, right? This is happening in other parts of the world, including North America and Europe as well. So in this graph, I just want to show the sort of historical and projected pattern of population aging. As you can see from this, the phenomena of population aging is really global, and that by 2050, about a quarter of the global population will be over the age of 60. And of course, you already know this, right? That Korea will be leading the pack in terms of the aging population. That estimate shows that nearly 33% of the population, 1/3 of Koreans, will be over the age of 65 by 2040. That's within one generation. And by 2065, another generation, elderly people will make up something like 42.5% of Korean population. So the second feature of the current care and care work situation is that as the demand for care continues to rise, we're seeing serious shortages of care workers, and this too will continue. We really can't stop this. And the main reason for this is simply that the supply cannot keep up with the demand. And an important reason why the supply of care workers can't keep up with the demand of care is that while care work is truly rewarding work, it is also physically and emotionally demanding. It comes with physical and health risks. And because it has been traditionally considered women's work, it is also often comes with low wages, poor working conditions, low occupational status, and limited career advancement. So not surprisingly, because of this, most of the care workers are women, and increasingly, they are overrepresented by racialized and immigrant and migrant women in many countries. Let's see if this works. Yes. So the UN data shows that across the globe, 70% of the care workforce are women, and in the US, 85% of the healthcare and childcare workers are women. And here too, Black and Hispanic Latino women often are overrepresented in care work as well. Similarly, in Canada, where I come from, 82% of the healthcare and social assistance force are women, and immigrant women are also overrepresented here. But it is not just North America. The World Health Organization estimates that they estimated that there will be a shortage of something like 2.3 million long-term care workers in Europe alone right now. And across OECD, already something like 30% of home-based caregivers, they're mainly long-term caregivers, the home-based caregiver workforces are foreign-born, so they are immigrant workers. And in some countries, like Italy, 89% of their home-based care workers are foreign-born, are foreign care workers. 75% in Greece, 67% in Spain, and 50% in Luxembourg. This table, I'm not sure whether you could see this, it shows the occupation that with the largest increase in job vacancies and changes in their wages in Canada. What this table shows is that the jobs with the largest increases in job vacancies over the last couple of years have been largely care-related jobs, such as nurses, medical lab technicians, social workers, nurses' aide, home care workers, and child care workers. Their wages are mostly low. The minimum wage in Canada is $15.50 per hour. Theirs is only barely about $1 or $2 higher than that. Their wages have all gone up because of the COVID sort of premiums, but when you actually calculate their wages, wage increase against the inflation, which was back in this spring 5.5%, their wages, their real wages, had actually declined rather than increased. So the COVID pandemic has really exposed the importance of care and care work, and how our economies and social functionings really depend on the invisible work of care. And in many countries, this has really intensified the call to bring in migrant care workers. So now, let me talk a little bit about the impact of the COVID pandemic on care work and care migration. Since 2020, in many countries, what we have seen are the increased demand for care and care workers. For those who are already working, native-born care workers, they have seen their workload increased. We also see increased work-related stresses, increased risks of contracting COVID. Not surprisingly, many of these workers have quit their jobs due to the stresses and burnout. And as a result, in many countries, there are serious nurses and care worker shortages, and employers are really facing increased recruitment problems. This, in turn, has incentivized many employers in many countries to try to recruit foreign nurses and foreign migrant care workers. For migrant care workers, the situation has not been very good either. We know from research that in many countries, migrant care workers have faced mobility restrictions, confinement, increased workload, increased employer demand, reduced wages, wage cuts, unemployment, and less food if you're domestic workers. But we also know, strangely, in some studies, in some cases like in Singapore, the employer's need for foreign domestic workers has been so high that they actually increase the wages of foreign domestic workers in order to recruit them. And they're not able to recruit them Because even if migrant care workers are willing to migrate to work and travel, the travel bans and other restrictions have limited their mobilities. And so we hear things such as, the migrant care workers that have been stranded in the airports and shelters. For sending countries, COVID has been a very serious problem because it has meant a serious decline in remittances from migration of care workers. So, for example, Asian Development Bank in 2020 estimated that there will be a global remittance drop of something like $57.6 billion, 9.7% of the global GDP in 2020 as a result of the COVID. And the Asia-Pacific region alone will see the decline of something like $31.4 billion in remittance. So in terms of the social and economic perspectives on the transnational global migration of care workers, the way I see this is that I see migrant care workers as a kind of a form of global service supply chain. Just like other global commodity supply chain, migrant care workers are part of that global economic system that supply human labor and human capital, or what Arlie Hawkshaw refers to as their commodity being love. So it's a human's love supply chain. From strictly economic point of view, global migration of care workers, of course, benefit families and women and the economies of the receiving countries, because by using migrant care workers, they can outsource the care that they don't want to do or they can't do. These migrant care workers fill in the labor needs, and they enable families and women to balance work and care. It can also benefit migrant care workers and their families in the sending countries too, through such things as remittances, and in some cases, especially for migrant nurses, it also could provide them with opportunities to find higher paying work jobs and career opportunities. But it is also really important to remember that unlike commodity supply chain, migrant care workers are human and not objects, and their labor or their love is often invisible. So their work is often undervalued and ignored, and it ignores the care needs of the care workers and their own families. And moreover, because they're human beings and not objects, migrant care workers are also prone to exploitation and human rights abuse. So, how do we create a fairer and more sustainable global care migration? As I said, global migration of care workers will continue because the demand for the care will continue to outstrip the supply of care workers. What countries and employers must do is to make it fairer and more sustainable by applying the principle of 5 R's that ILO often talks about. That is, recognize, reduce, redistribute care, not only between women and men, but also between family, states, community, and market, reward their care work, and then finally represent the care workers. So what does it mean? It means that by applying Shara Razavi's concept of the care diamond, which many people have mentioned in the previous panels, where we see care as being produced and transacted, provided by 4 key social and economic institutions and actors, the state, the market, the family, and the community or civil society. We need to ensure that there will be an ongoing social engagement and social consensus being formulated, and that these institutional actors will have to take actions to ensure fairer and more sustainable global care migration. So for the states, what it means is that they must invest in care, not just as a tool of national economic growth for through national care systems, but also in terms of income support for the carers. That we also have to focus on, I think I lost the PowerPoint. I think my time might be up. Is it? I just have a few more slides. I don't know what happened. Okay, so what else the states need to do? They also have to focus on quality of care, not just quantity of care. That means by raising wages and improving the working conditions of the care workers, and education and training for the care workers. They also need to see their investment in care and care work as in an intersectoral dimension, so as to make a very coherent national systems approach to care policies and care policies. Finally, the states will have to use the what I call intergenerational perspectives to develop policies toward care and care work, meaning the they need to plan policies with long-term perspectives and policies that would enable mutual support across generations. What about the market and business sectors? And this is when I need the PowerPoint, because I need to read from that, but it's blank. Oh, there it is. But I cannot see. Okay, so what about business and employers? They need to invest in employees' family and personal care needs by such things as extending care leaves beyond maternity and parental leaves to non-regular workers. That's something that has been raised before. Employers and corporate sectors would also have to focus on women, of course, yes, but not just women, also men, because what happened? Okay, I lost it. Okay, so employers will have to provide such things as supporting women's career and employment, yes, but more effective and longer paternity leaves, or even male worker care leaves, so that we would actually have redistribution of care responsibility from women to men. In other words, what I'm saying is that employers also have to put an effort in ensuring that they support both men and women to do care work. And finally, so employers will need to focus on equity and inclusion in their family support policies. Okay. The family also have to sort of share more of their unpaid direct and indirect care work between men and women. So men should take more paternity leave and other care leaves. Family members will have to educate their children about care and the value of the care work, and to advocate publicly for more gender equality. Finally, community and civil society will need to strengthen their community, neighborhood, social networks around them to do more care work, advocate for care services and programs in communities, advocate for equality and inclusion, and advocate for workers' rights. So what about migrant care workers? What we need is, so the need for migrant care workers will continue. What we need to really focus on is better wages and working conditions to ensure the quality of care moving forward. And that there have to be, we need to sort of work to ensure that there are different options and pathways for migrant care workers. In other words, migrant care workers, that we need to not only focus on migrant care workers for child care, but also for long-term care and disability care as well. Migrant care workers should also have the choice and option of live in or live out, whether they could bring their family with them to the receiving country or not. And migrant care workers would need to, it will be important to consider policy option to enable them to move from temporary migrant worker position to pathway to permanent residency. I do have a last part, which is about Canada as an example, but I know I've already taken so much time. I could stop here, and then I could share the PowerPoint with everybody, rather than sort of hogging all the time. So I will stop here, as I think my 15 to 20 minutes is up. Thank you.
Thank you for your understanding. And also, thank you, Dr. Peng, for bringing us global perspective on the context surrounding migrant care workers.